To commemorate the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II, we're interviewing a group of Scriber residents who were participants in that particular war. Today's subject is Frank Church. Frank?
Well, to begin with, I should tell you where I came from. I was born in Syracuse in 1921, and at the age of 10, we came to Scriba, where my father was born and brought up. And I went to grade school here, at part of grade school at District Number 10, and then went to Oswego High School and graduated from there. And in to get right to the war period, and I enlisted in the Army Air Corps, as it was known then, on July 4th, 1942. But I was not called up to active service until January of 1943, at which time I proceeded to the Army Air Corps base at Keesler Field, Mississippi for basic training. And after graduating from basic training, I remained at Keesler Field because they had a B-24 mechanic school there, which I attended, graduated from. And following that, I went to Harlington, Texas, to aerial gunnery school. After graduating from gunnery school, I proceeded to Westover Air Force Base in Massachusetts, where our crews were formed. There were pilots and co-pilots and navigators and bombardiers and gunners for all positions. I was my job would be flight engineer and top turret gunner, and we had a radio operator. We all formed there, hundreds of us, as a matter of fact. I remember the day that our crew was formed, we went to the theater and each of us was given a card with a number on it. And there were 9 other people besides me with that same number. When they called that number off, we went and sat down, and that's how the crew was formed. We never saw each other before. Right. And from Westover, we proceeded to, as a crew, to Charleston Air Base, where we trained as a crew, and we did over water flying to Cuba and night flying and so on. Did all the training as a crew we could together. And after we finished that, we went to New York City and boarded the Queen Elizabeth and headed for the United Kingdom. We landed in Scotland on D-Day, so we didn't participate in the invasion. We got there the day the invasion started.
Okay.
And right from there, we went to North Island, where we were given orientation lectures and told how to behave ourselves in England when we got there, which is where we go. And various things about the people and customs. And we left there and proceeded to the first air base we were at. We were only there a very short time, and we moved, in fact, 2 or 3 times before we came to our regular permanent base. And we formed the nucleus of what I found out just recently, in fact this year, a brand new type of aerial warfare. They didn't have a name for it when I was we were actually doing, but it turns out that the squadron I belong to is still in existence, and it's still active. It doesn't have airplanes, but it's a paper research development type squadron. In fact, I met the people just this summer who run it. But what we formed was the 39th Heavy Bombardment Squadron. And we were in B-24s, by the way. Okay. And because we weren't going to be dropping bombs, we dropped our bombardier from our crew and flew with 9 members of our crew instead of 10. The 39th was based most of the time that we were flying with it at a place called Cheddington in England, which is in Bedfordshire, near the city of Luton. And we flew eventually 55 combat missions, and these were flown in concert with missions of the 8th Air Force bombing missions. And what we did was go out in our bomb bays, instead of carrying bombs, were loaded with communications equipment and anti-radar equipment. Our purpose was to disrupt communications and radar, German radar, so they couldn't pick up our bomber streams on their radar screens. We could go out and set up a diversion, and they would think that there was a mission going somewhere else. They'd send up their airplanes chasing them all over Eastern or Western Europe, and I couldn't find us or the bomber stream, which was somewhere else. This was good only up to a certain point, and then the bomber streams flew out of the range of our protection. But we also were there when they came back, and we flew mostly in the area of the Channel and the North Sea and Normandy, northern France, and the Rhineland, and we were in that area. It's interesting that this type of warfare is still part of the Air Force. It's called electronic warfare now.
Okay.
And which was, it was not called that then, and I just heard that term for the first time this year. We had a reunion of our squadron down in North Carolina, the only one we've ever had. But after our crew became a family type of situation, when I went to this reunion, the only people I knew at that reunion, except by names that I remember, were my own crew. I've seen them since several times. But to get down to that reunion and meet all of these people whose names I had in my mind, I could remember the minute they mentioned their name. I knew the name, but I couldn't, of course, I didn't recognize them. They were all old like I am. Do you have any specific questions you'd like to ask?
Sure. Well, I was wondering, were there any other Scriber residents in your company? Or
No, I only met one person all the time I was in the service from Scriber, and that was Kurt Schultz. He came down to Keesler Field. He transferred from the infantry to the Air Corps, and he was there just a short time. And then when the German counteroffensive came along in '44, they took all the trained infantrymen who were in the Air Corps and put them back in the infantry, and that's how we happened to go back into the infantry.
Okay.
Because he was a staff sergeant at the time, and so that he had a lot of training, and they needed him.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. What were the reactions of people in England towards American soldiers there?
Pretty much, I found that they were very hospitable. They were happy to have us there, and for obvious reasons, because we had the war probably would have gone another way. Not that they didn't do an awful lot to win that war themselves, but they had they needed help. And in spite of the fact that if, for instance, the town of Scriba was inundated by a bunch of foreigners, outnumbering us in many places, it was amazing to me that they kept their goodwill as long as they did, because it was kind of overwhelming for them. Everything changed. Life totally changed because there were so many of us.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But by and large, we were welcomed and we were treated well, and in return, we treated them well too. It was for at least my experience was a good one.
Okay. Okay.
Where were you on VE days at, Frank?
I was through with my missions. I was back home. But I was still in the Air Corps. I was down at San Antonio, Texas, about to commence training as a B-29 flight engineer to go to Japan.
Oh, man.
So, and that's when VE Day happens.
Okay.
And VJ Day, of course, was later in the year, and at that time, just that summer, they had come up with a point system for discharging people. If you had enough points, you could get out, and I had enough, so I eventually got out and came home on September 5th of '45.
Okay.
So,
what point during the war was morale among your unit the highest?
the highest? Well, our morale generally was pretty good. We had lots of time to ourselves. When we weren't needed to fly a mission, we could go anywhere and do anything we wanted to do.
Mhm.
We were not restricted to the post or anything like that. And in fact, our squad was probably a lot different than many of the others, but we did have a lot of free time. The only time they wanted us, we had to be there if we had a mission, and they were posted the day before.
Mm.
So we knew when we had to be there, and we made sure we stayed home that night. We didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
And but I think the point where most people were concerned about what was going to happen was the big German offensive, counteroffensive in late 1944, which culminated in the Battle of the Bulge.
Mhm.
And we flew support missions over the Battle of the Bulge, carrying counter-communications equipment that jammed the German communications on the ground, especially their tank communications and artillery communications. And we were sent out. There were 3 or 4 of us, crews that went out on that mission for several days. And it was not a thing that a person would want to look forward to, because when we went out, we were given a pattern to fly, a very definite pattern. So many minutes on this heading and so many minutes and flying a square or an oblong. Well, it didn't take long for the Germans with their radar equipment to find us. And
Okay.
the anti-aircraft was very heavy. In fact, it was so heavy that we left our post and flew away. We wouldn't stay there.
Okay.
It was suicide to stay in that position. And we watched the planes ahead of us in this formation. Didn't seem that they could survive. The flak was so heavy.
Wow.
And so our pilot said, "That's enough of this. We're not here to sacrifice ourselves. We're not here. We're not going to do any good. So let's get out of here." And we did.
Yes.
And I think what they did then, and after that, was to change the patterns that were being flown daily. And also, I think they could change it during the day when as long as we were out there.
Mhm.
Because that steady pattern, they could finally zero in on us because they had radar equipment. They could pick us up, and their anti-aircraft guns were radar directed, so they could hardly miss.
Okay.
We knew that, so we got out of it.
Would they usually fly a few of these communications and planes that you're on? Would they fly a few of those together in order to scramble their signals, or would there be just your plane that would fly around?
Well, we were up together, but they might put 7 or 8 or 10 airplanes up on the same mission, but we were far enough apart so we never saw each other.
Okay.
And once we got over Western Europe or the Scandinavian, we went up close to the Scandinavian countries
Okay.
just to divert German aircraft, waste their gasoline, and that was the main idea, was to keep them away from the violent streams and waste fuel. We even went up and flew when there were no missions.
Okay.
Usually it was in terrible weather because and the Germans wouldn't expect anybody to be up that day, but we'd go up and turn on our equipment, and it would show up on their radar screens as something. They couldn't tell what it was, but it was something that didn't belong there, so it had to be Americans or British planes. And they would send their fighters up, and they were really short of gasoline, and fly around looking for us. That's what we wanted them to do.
You wanted to waste their gas and
Waste
waste.
their gas, and we're out there pilots, and we're out there airplanes, whatever we could do to get them off the ground and on wild goose chases.
Mhm. Were you escorted by any fighters when you went to do that?
We did, but we couldn't see them. They were up higher than we were, and that was generally the case. You never saw your escort, which kept you wondering, are they really there?
Right, sure. Yeah.
Now, when you went over on the Queen Elizabeth, that would be Queen Elizabeth I, wouldn't it? Were you in a convoy, or were they counting on the speed?
The speed, the Queen Elizabeth, I believe, changed course every few minutes. And we were leaving New York headed for England, but we got so far south that the officers of the Queen Mary came out in whites and shorts. And that's how much they zigzagged across the Atlantic to avoid. But the Queen Elizabeth was faster than any U-boat.
Really?
But they couldn't maintain a course because then they could intercept it, no matter how fast it went. They could have, so that's why they zigzagged. I think it was something like every few minutes they changed course. And I remember seeing that Queen Elizabeth and how huge it was. And I couldn't believe it when we got out in that North Atlantic to see the waves come over the bow. And that was, we went up in the front of the ship with a super stretcher and watched it. It just boiled right over the top of the bow of that ship, as big as it was.
Was it very much seasickness?
No, because actually the ship didn't roll and pitch. What do they call those things they have in them to keep them?
Stabilizers or
well,
something.
there's some
Something,
name for it.
yeah.
But anyway, I remember that you walk away along a companionway in the inside of the ship, and you look up this long companionway, and everybody's walking in, you know, and it would stay that way, and it was just a gradual correction and go back the other way. But it was so slow that, you know, you didn't get seasick from it unless you stared at that. I suppose that would get you after a while. But,
Yeah, sure.
but it was amazing how smooth that ride was.
Do you have a memorable moment, one that you could categorize as the most memorable during World War II experiences?
Well, I think probably that, well, there's depending on what you consider a memorable one. I guess as far as actual perhaps fear might be considered would be over the Battle of Bulge. When I've already told you about that. And memorable times was every time we touched down after a mission we got back. And another one was when I landed in Florida on my birthday in 1945, back from Europe. And we came back. I volunteered to fly with a bunch of volunteers who, none of whom I knew before, and we flew what they called the War Worry B-24 back to the States. And we had, it was in, well, it was in the winter because it was in March, and they wouldn't let us fly the North Atlantic in the wintertime to the States because you were bucking headwinds all the way. So we had to fly to Africa. We landed in Marrakesh and went from there to Dakar on the west coast, and then across the South Atlantic to Brazil, and we went from Brazil up to Trinidad and then to Florida. So that was my trip home.
You got the scenic route.
Yeah, much better than the North Atlantic, I thought.
Yes.
And so I did land on my birthday, which was a nice present too.
Yes.
But that was,
And when you came back to the States, where did you go? And
well, I came home for a short time, then they sent us down to Atlantic City for, I guess it was what they call R&R now. I was there a couple of weeks, and then I was sent off to San Antonio, Texas, to start preliminaries for training as a B-29 flight engineer. And I went from there to Amarillo, Texas, and that's when I found out about this point system. And that's when I came home in September, or I was sent to Fort Dix, where I was discharged.
Okay.
And that was on September 6th.
Okay.
September 5th of 45 that I was discharged from the service.
Okay. Nice. And what did you do after that?
Well, I just got a job here in Oswego for a short time down the Diamond Match plant, and then I went to work in a store in Clyde as a manager trainee, and the store was sold. Eventually, I went into sales, working for a company that we bought from for the store, and I worked there for 23 years, and then I left there and went to work for another company, and I worked for them for 15 years. This is all in sales.
Okay.
And now I'm politicking. But that's pretty much the story.
Now, where did you meet your wife?
Well, I met her before the war, and she was going to school out here at the college, and that's where I met her. But it was several years before we got married. I met her before the war, and it wasn't till 1950 that we got married. But, so I saw her off and on all those years, but it was not, we didn't really have a serious relationship until the end.
Now, have you gone back to some reunions, you said, with your...
Well, we've had several reunions with our own crew, but this one I went to just last month, or this month, was the first time the squadron has ever been together as an entire squadron. And this was due to the efforts, the son of one of the fellows that was with us in one of the original 4 crews that formed the squadron. And his son did this for him. He's still alive, and he was there when we went down to the reunion. And he did a great job of putting that all together. He did it all, mostly all at his own expense. He called me, and if he called me, he called everybody else that was there and a lot more who couldn't get there. And he had a reception at his home, and then he had another party in the following day in the community center, the place where he lives is Apex, North Carolina.
Now, how many people show up for this sort of thing?
Well, there were about 40, I think, of
That's very
actual. They were just flying crew members that he invited. And after 50 years, that's pretty good turnout when you consider what can happen in 50 years to people.
That's true.
Yeah.
And some of them, of course, lived a long way off and couldn't come. The furthest anyone came was from Seattle, Washington.
Really?
But there were a lot of others who probably lived closer, but still couldn't make it. One of our crew members who was out near Denver couldn't come this time, but he'd been to several of our other crew reunions. And there was another story that goes with my time over in England that's very interesting, I think. Once we got settled on the base we were going to be on, the radio operator and I went into the city of Luton, which was a few miles away and the biggest city near us. We were about 30 miles from London. And we went to the Red Cross to find a place to stay overnight. And they sent us to a home with some people by the name of Bellberry. And she had turned out was born in Lynn, Massachusetts, and she was a nurse in World War I and married this Englishman and stayed there. Well, she was so happy to have us that we became more or less, our whole crew, it was open house all the time we were over there. Every time we went into Luton, we'd stay overnight, we went to Bellberry's, and they never would charge us anything. And they even used to feed us as short as food was over there. But, and after the war, her husband died, and she came back to the United States and brought her daughter, who was only about 8 or 9 years old when we were there. And they had in their house a big steel, in the corner of the dining room, a steel air raid shelter. And when there were air raids, they all went into that steel thing. And I remember seeing it there. And her daughter's over here now, and she was at the reunion this year with it.
Nice.
But they took, she has a book that she had down there. It was just a composition book, but everybody that stayed with her, she had them sign a book on where they were from. And she had people from all over the world, Australia, New Zealanders, all kinds of servicemen from all branches of services, of the Allied services, and she opened her house for them all. Was quite a remarkable person.
Indeed.
Now, when you're talking about the air raid shelters that they had, when you were in England, did they often have air raid practices?
No,
Drills?
I think those people knew what to do by the time we got there. When I was there, the buzz bombs were popular coming over from, but they were aimed at the bigger cities like London, and as much as they could aim them, they weren't very reliable about where they went, but they would aim in the general direction of England or London, and that really not too far from European shores, so they didn't, if they deviated off a course a little bit, they'd still land somewhere in that area.
Okay.
Of course, those people knew what to go, where to go, and what to do. They knew that long before I got there, so. And they weren't, we heard V-bombs coming over. You could hear them, they sounded like a locomotive. They sound just like a locomotive engine. It's when they stopped that you had to watch out. You hoped they were far away. When they stopped, that engine stopped, they just fell.
Okay.
They
Okay.
ran out of fuel.
Now, when you were flying, were there, could you tell there were blackouts maybe in the cities?
Yeah, they were always
You flew over?
absolutely blacked out. There was no light anywhere. I know even in England it was the same way. We used to go into the city of Luton and go to dances and stuff and all. And when you walked out of that hotel, it was pitch black unless there was a moon out or something. There was no light anywhere.
Wow.
And you had to learn to get around in the dark. But when we were flying, first started flying missions, we flew them with RAF at night, and that's what you've heard of Pathfinder aircraft, perhaps. Well, they went out ahead and dropped incendiaries on the target, so they would and start fires, and that's how we'd locate the fires, the targets at night. They would go out just before dark and fly those suicide missions, dropping those incendiaries on the target area. And that's how they could locate it. And once they started dropping bombs, there was no, fires all over. Then I remember one night we were flying a pattern out just over the coast of Europe, and that night they were bombing one of the big Dutch cities, Rotterdam, or one of them, and it was unbelievable the fires that were going on. It lit up the whole sky. You could see airplanes in the sky from where we were flying, between us and the fire. So once they found their target there, and they dropped bombs, fire started, so they didn't have any trouble locating their target after that.
Yeah. And when you were in England, was there a lot of food rationing that you could tell?
Oh yeah, it was pretty. We used to take, in fact, we used to take food with us. Out of the mess hall. It wasn't, officially tolerated, but we did it, and to people. Just to give them something to help them out a little bit, especially with the people we stayed with. Because we were eating their food, and we tried to supplement. Theirs was some of our stuff, like Spam. Good stuff.
Yeah, very good stuff. Did you get into London where you were stationed?
I went to London once, and Mr. Battlebury took us because he knew his way around London. And we went to the Palladium Theatre. And we went to Toussaint's Wax Museum.
It's still there.
It's still there. It's a wonderful. Have you been to it?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know what it was like when you, but it was an amazing place when I went in. I remember seeing those bobbies standing on those landings, and they was just as like life. In fact, you feel like going and asking them a question or something. They were so realistic, and we saw a lot of that.
I'm assuming that there was a lot of bomb damage evident while you were there.
Yeah, in some places. I didn't spend, that was the only time I went to London. I regret that I didn't go more often because it wasn't that far away. But I saw some bomb damage, but in the city of Luton where we were, there was none. It was only 35 miles from London, 30 miles far from here to Syracuse. But there was no bomb damage there. It skipped that city for some, probably no strategic importance to it as far as industries and stuff.
When you look at the photographs of the area around St. Paul's Cathedral during the war, just devastating.
Oh, yeah, unbelievable. Same thing happened in Germany. I remember, I'd been to Mainz and when Jimmy was over there since the war, and it's a beautiful city, nice business area, in the big square they have and all those, marketplace and all that. And I saw pictures of it after the war and it was leveled. There was nothing standing.
Wow.
It's amazing how they got that rebuilt like that.
That's true.
Anything else I can tell you?
Well, I think this has been very, very productive, Frank, and we certainly appreciate your participation in this project.
I appreciate being asked to be part of it very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Do we shake hands at the...
Well, we
That's
think,
it.
there we are, sure.
Okay. Are we off the camera?
We're off,
We're
let's shut
off.
it off.